Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Where is Muran'ga going to cast their vote, the presidential vote on August 9th general election? This is a question that its time comes towards every other general election since Kenya got independence in 2002. And in this exclusive analysis, I will break down to you behind the scene intrigues on Muran'ga factor that informed the decision for Paul Kepigande to be picked as Nairobi governor candidate last minute, and how it also informed the decision to drop Sabina and Peter Kenneth for Raila Odinga's running mate in favor of one Martha Wangari Karua. In today's Nation, there is a story in page 5, 4, 5, and 6. It's called the Martha Effect. We'll look at that sometime, but I also want to invite you to just take some time and watch that story. It's talking about what Martha Karua has added in Raila Odinga's campaign. But there is an interesting article in The Elephant. It's written by Dauti Gahura. The title is The Muran'ga Factor in the Upcoming Presidential Elections. There is also another one in the Kenya News Agency, Family that helped Kenyatta sent to presidency, complaints of neglect. Those two articles are very critical, and if you can find some time, I'll encourage you to at least find time and read them. Muran'ga factor was a key element in this election, and interestingly, it's also a factor on why Mike Sonko was ousted as Nairobi governor. But to make you get to understand this, I will try to trace this to 1961, when Jomo Kenyatta was released from the detention. It was after the general election had been held. Then for him to go to LegCo, there was a need for one member of parliament to forfeit his seat so that he could be nominated, or rather he could go through. And there was first a general feeling of tomboya and the leaders within Nairobi and the central counties, because it had to be from those central counties. Then one of his friends, Chief Njiri, who was a friend to Jomo Kenyatta, talked with his son, or rather his grandson by then. Karanja Wanjiri was now the person. Then they talked to Kariuki Wanjiri, who was the first Kigumu member of parliament to forfeit his seat so that Kenyatta could be allowed to go to LegCo. So remember, Kenyatta was released somewhere in August after the general election had been held, and so there was no way that he did not participate in the 1961 general election as an elected member, because by that time he was in detention. So that seat from Kigumo is what elevated Kenyatta 1 to become the president of the country, because from the LegCo he rose from the prime minister, and when Kenya was getting its first independence as the president, Kenyatta became the first president. So that is the first in 1963 elections. That's how Muran'ga then played a critical role for the rise of President Jomo Kenyatta, that is Kenyatta 1. Kenyatta will then award Kariuki Wanjiri as assistant minister in the government, and he lost the seat in 1969, although later Kariuki Wanjiri died in 1975. So in the article I was sharing with you on the family that was crying was the family of Kariuki Wanjiri, that was complaining that Kenyatta, or rather even the Kenyatta, to neglected them. So that is what happened, and Muran'ga played critical one. By the time Kenyatta was dying, the only person that was closest to power was Mwai Kibaki, because Kibaki was a finance minister. So it happened when Moi took over, there was a bit of, he had to work with the Muran'ga team and the Kiambu team because he was facing opposition from Jaramogi and Ochuka that were not against government. Fast forward to 1992, the person Muran'ga factor was again in the presidential race. Kenneth Matiba had broken ties with Jomo Kenyatta, with Jaramogi Oginga Odinga from the initial Ford and formed Ford Sili. So the Ford of Matiba had fronted Matiba as a presidential candidate. Then by that time, the repeal of Section 2 had been done by Moi. And from nowhere, the powerful forces, international community, and the local politics played here. Then, despite the fact that Matiba was standing a good chance, Kibaki spoiled Matiba's chance. Matiba was from Muran'ga, Kibaki was from Nyeri. Kibaki formed his own party known as the DP and vied to the DP. So in that election, Moi got 1.9 million votes. Matiba came second at 1.4. Kibaki had 1 million and Jaramogi had 900,000. Were it not for Kibaki vying, they were in a position to dethrone Moi as the president. So that's why Moi was likely losing 1992 elections. But because of that, a chance for a Muran'ga, a man from Muran'ga to become president was restored by Moi Kibaki. And by the way, it didn't work until even when in 1997, Matiba was not very active. I think age had already caught up with him, and he was not even now, could not. So ladies and gentlemen, what happened was in 2003, when Kibaki then emerged, Kibaki became a president, and Kibaki was from Nyeri. So by that time, the Muran'ga aspect did not play a critical role. In fact, they did have a formidable candidate. Now look here, when Kibaki formed government, he worked with one powerful politician from Muran'ga. That was John Michuki. John Michuki was his Minister of Transport, and that's why he brought the famous Michuki rules. Then when he lost government, when he lost the referendum of the 2005 that was now spearheaded by Kina Raila, John Michuki was taken to the Minister of Interior in coordination of national government. That is the minister he served, and he helped Kibaki in the 2007 post-election violence issue. Remember, he was a minister in charge, and by that time also in charge of communication and all that. So when the TVs and the social media were being shut for the dirty business that was conducted by Kibaki regime, for him even to be sworn in, the person that did the dirty business was from Muran'ga. That was John Michuki. So Muran'ga played a critical role in that. And that is why in 2012, John Michuki is the person that endorsed Uhuru, saying that anyone who wanted to speak to the Central Kenya, and I think that famous clip is around, anyone who wanted to speak to Central Kenya needed to go through Uhuru Kenyatta. The same thing what Moses Kure was saying, that anyone who wanted Central Kenya needed to go through Karua. So that time Michuki played a role and even played succession politics for Uhuru Kenyatta. You see the way Muran'ga has been a factor in all the elections. In Grand Coalition he was a minister of the environment, and that's why when Raila was doing the Mau evictions, he was at the center of it, and he was the handman for President Mwai Kibaki. Then it happened, Uhuru became government, formed the government. Muran'ga was not a very key aspect, and by that time, remember, he faced off with Peter Kenneth. But Uhuru worked with Macharia, who is from Muran'ga, but also in the second term you saw he's still having Macharia. Then he had Nyeri aspect. There was this one of there was the Nyeri one where he worked with Karua and the other two. So ladies and gentlemen, in this video I will now look forward to 2022, how now it's shaping that, and that is why we have the punchline. If you are watching this video and you have not yet subscribed, I want to humbly request you to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell, because where we are heading is where there's the gist of this analysis. David Kahuti was saying something, that he was somewhere in Kandiri talking to people, young and old. Now, in this, I want us to, I'll refer more to this article, because this is the person that made the observations, and because of plagiarism, sometimes you give credit where it's due. He's saying in this article, I spent the whole day in Kandiri talking to people, young and old, men, women, and by the time I was leaving, I was certain about one thing. The Muran'ga folks didn't want anything to do with President Uhuru. What I wasn't sure of is where their political sympathies lay. Then he said, so there was a meeting and he was just trying to gather what exactly was happening, that people did want to hear of Uhuru. Now, I returned to Muran'ga the following month in the expansive Kangema. It is still huge, even after Madeira was hived off from larger Kangema constituency, and I think people from that area can tell us whether really Madeira was from the larger Kangema. Funerals provide a good barometer that captures people's political sentiments. Of course, they take that opportunity to talk. This is what I want to capture this. What I gathered from the crowd was that President Uhuru had destroyed their livelihood. Remember, many of the Nairobi city trading, hawking, big downtown real estate and restaurants are run and owned largely by Muran'ga people. The famous Nyamakima trading area of downtown Nairobi has been run by Muran'ga Kikuyus. If you go to Nyamakima, this side of Nyamakima River Road connects to these people are doing businesses in Ngara, all that, Thika Road, all the way to Thika. Majority of people doing business on that side of Nairobi are people from Muran'ga. And when Sonko was a governor, they were most affected. And by the way, that is why the word by Dindi Nyoro that President Uhuru Kenyatta had destroyed their businesses, the ones that were doing real estate and that, were the voices of prominent Muran'ga people who were feeling that Nairobi County had destroyed their businesses. Most of them were affected, especially even the hawkers within Nairobi. You know, they were really being harassed east, down, west, south. And there was a protest, a special protest by prominent business community within Muran'ga. You will be told that the hawkers within Nairobi CBD, majority of those hawkers, if you speak to 10 and just try to do this, you'll realize that 3 are from Muran'ga. The Kikuyus, if you come from Nairobi, the next county is Muran'ga. So Muran'ga is a very critical aspect, and to my understanding, one of the reasons that made President Uhuru to keep Sonko from Nairobi was because of this community. The Muran'ga business community did not feel comfortable with the unfavorable policies, the demolitions, and the businesses. And even in 2018, their goods, he's saying, their goods were confiscated and declared contraband by the government. Many of the businesses went under this, despite the merchants not only wholeheartedly throwing their support to President Uhuru's controversial re-election, but contributing handsomely to the presidential kitty. They supported the president. Now, in the light of this, the Muran'ga business community fronted Peter Kenneth for Raila Odinga's presidential bid, because they had already known, and that's why they were so much with Raila, and Raila was keen to them. Part of the conversations with Raila was on how they were going to protect businesses, because Uhuru was blamed to have destroyed their businesses, even though Uhuru passed the blame to one Polycarp Igade. Now what happened? They groomed Peter Kenneth because Peter Kenneth was from Muran'ga, either to go for the deputy president post or for Nairobi governor. But then there was so much into the DP post. Now, because of the dynamics of politics that were playing out, Raila settled on Martha Karua, and Martha Karua is from Kirinyaga. Then, for the first time, the presidency was coming out of Kiambu and Nyeri, because the senior Kenyatta was from Kiambu, the son was from Kiambu, then Mwai Kibaki was from Nyeri. So when Ruto picked Rigathi Gachagua, Ruto left out the Muran'ga matrix. And you will be told, my good friend Patrick Moro will tell you this, that the choice of Rigathi Gachagua did not even sit comfortable with prominent politicians and the machineries of Muran'ga. Now, Polycarp Igathe was born in Muran'ga but grew up in Olkalau, Nyandarua. When this team realized that there was one condition, that pick Karua, but then to secure our interest that was destroyed in Nairobi, President Uhuru Kenyatta had to bring Polycarp Igathe. And that is why the switch was between Igathe and Karua. If Raila would have settled on a candidate, not even in Karua, without Karua in picture, Raila's running mate was to be Peter Kenneth, because Muran'ga people were at the center of it. And they decided that yes, if the presidency and the running mate is going to, Kirinyaga, then Nairobi had to be to them. That is why Polycarp Igathe came from the blues. And my good Patrick will tell you that compared to Azimio and Kenya Kwanza, the people that emerged and addressed the Muran'ga factor is Azimio la Umoja. William Ruto side did not, but then it means that they were deep into it. Could it be why President Uhuru Kenyatta had really fronted Sabina Chege? Because he told Sabina Chege not to go for any elective seat there, but to work on the national space, because there was something for him. Even though in Muran'ga is where there are two emerging presidential candidates from central Kenya, Mwani Wairia and Jimmy Wanjigi. Now, these are the two. If you look at the whole game, the only other two alternative presidential candidates are coming from Muran'ga. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, we can say, and I can say without a fear or favor, without any contradiction, that Martha Karua and Polycarp Igathe was a switch game. That's my analysis, and I hope you've enjoyed it.